Hi, it's Janet Fitch, and it's Writing Wednesday once again. And for today's topic, I am suggesting we look at structuring the novel. Now, I know I've had I've had at least one video about conventional methods of structuring the novel, the chronological, the braided novel, and braided narratives and so on. But today I wanted to look at how people have innovated new forms of the novel. I thought that sometimes even if you write a conventional narrative, just knowing that there are other possibilities is exciting to the inner writer. Goes, oh my God, it's like a playground that sometimes we get so purposeful in our writing. You know, what's going to happen next, and what's going to happen next, and what's going to happen next, that we forget that this too is at play. And play is something that when the writer can play, it's like somebody who's just run a race who can do pirouettes or jetés or something. It shows creative power to burn. And so I thought we'd take a look at some innovative structures that I've found. I was reading something this morning, I just finished a book, that I thought the structure was so interesting that I thought I would do this on narrative structure. So the first book I wanted to look at, I'm going to do a lot of flipping so that I can show you interesting books. So I'm sadly going to tear you away from my image, and we're going to look at some books. Okay. All right. Well, this is a book I just finished, The Travelers by Regina Porter. And this is a fascinating book with a tremendous cast of characters whom we don't know how they fit together until it comes up again and again. So there are times that we just don't know who is this, and that's part of the delight of the book, is that it doesn't hold your hand completely. That sometimes you do flip back to the list of characters. Now, who was Adele? Who was Minerva? Until you get how it fits together. Every chapter begins, there are dates. There are these sort of enigmatic photographs, which seem to be a style that's happening now. I'm reading Patti Smith's new book, The Year of the Monkey, which has this Sebald in his books. The Emigrants and the Rings of Saturn and stuff was the one who began it. Is this fiction? Is this nonfiction? That was very much a part of the style. But we begin with people, the Vincents. You don't even know if they're white or black until they encounter other people fairly several pages in. So there's a lot of interesting things about race that go on in this book where you have to sort it out. There are characters, generational characters. So James, the man James, we actually are introduced to his father first, who doesn't last long in the book, but actually does return. And it's told in discrete styles. So each chapter is told from the point of view of one of these characters. Not all of these are point of view characters. They're major characters, though. And they're all in voice. Some of them are third person and some of them are first person, which is always interesting when you're reading a novel to figure out why we are moving from first to third. What is the sense of it? Why do they do it? What happened? So these little chapters can cover a lifetime. They can cover a single incident. It jumps from 2009. This is very enigmatic because sometimes there's a list of dates and it's like, what is that all about? The repercussions of the incident. Now that I've read the book, I can tell you what that is. But a book is a journey of discovery. So this tantalizes us. What the heck? Then somebody in the beginning reappears here. Their children, their grandchildren, and themes emerge. A play is sort of a theme that runs through it. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. One of the characters is obsessed by it, and it affects his children's life. Then we jump to Act 3, 2010. Wow, what the heck? Who are all these people? This is a wonderful book, and I don't mind that it took some effort. Now we're talking about books. This is a popular book, in fact, The Travelers. This is not intended for a academic or an audience attracted to difficult literature. This is just a good read, but doing interesting things. They're running the race and they're doing the pirouettes. And it is a wonderful picture of two connected families and beautifully, beautifully written. And as writers, we need to expose ourselves to work that is... As writers, we need to expose ourselves to work that is not necessarily as easily consumed as straightforward narrative. As writers, we need to explore what else is being done, because the little writer inside wants to play. And what I'm showing you today are ways in which writers play, as well as telling their story. Form is a place to play. It's like getting dressed and wearing something interesting, as opposed to just your jeans and t-shirt that will be serviceable. You always want to be more than serviceable. You want to do something that really catches the reader's attention and pops them out of the every same old. So that was this book, The Travelers. I really enjoyed. And here's another one. These are both books out this year. So, by Ruchika, Tamar. And I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed this book. But one of the things that she does is, here's the first chapter. Now, I think that is really brilliant. She starts with 31. Now, what the heck, you wonder, as you're reading it. It is a story of right now, it's a young woman and seeking out a friend. Then the next chapter is 2. It's like, oh, are we going to go 2, 3, 4, 5? But we start with a young girl, 2. Then it goes to 3. So it continues. 2 continues into 3. Then we have 32, which continues the story of the first chapter, 31. So now we're getting a sense that we have a writer who's not just producing a story, but is concerned with how she's going to tell the story, how she's going to intrigue. There's more to it than just one thing after another. She's deciding what you're going to read next, and she's teasing you to say, look, okay, I might go back and forth. Follow along. Keep up. Here's 82. Wow. So my mathematical brain goes, wow, she starts with 31, she goes back to 2, then 3, but here we're leaping to 82. It gives you some sense of the scope that we might be seeing next. 82. And it's just a picture of these alchemical, astrological palmistry symbols. And no text at all. Then to 6. So we've skipped over 5. I think we've skipped over 4 as well. So now we're going to wait for 4 and 5. But we know this is still fairly early in the story because it's still 6. Here's 30. Now we're back to the later than 8. I mean, this was already had me convinced that it was going to be an interesting book just by the care that she took to give the reader a little bit of a mystery. 21. So it's not saying other people don't do the same. It's not saying that other people don't do the same kind of storytelling and flip around in time, but it gives the reader a little bit of a handhold, and it says both, it both intrigues you and gives you confidence that the writer knows what they're doing, and they have some excess computational energy. They have some excess brain power that they can devote to something like this. I really enjoyed that book, and that is not a book for, esoteric readers. That is a mainstream book that I very much enjoyed. Then there is a writer that I absolutely adore. He was on a panel with me at AWP a couple of years ago talking about the structure of the novel. And he's an avant-garde writer named Jeff Jackson, who I have come to greatly admire. He's he wrote a book that you can hear him talking, interviewed on the internet if you look around for him. And this is a book that came out last year called Destroy All Monsters. And it is a rock and roll novel. It's a sort of a thriller, a murder cult or murder contagion that kind of takes over the rock and roll world, and there are these murders of bands that may or may not be being punished for being lousy, and the end of music. What's really innovative about, and he's just a very innovative writer. I greatly admire him, and this is a very fun book. But what it does is it reads in both directions. There are 2 stories, Destroy All Monsters, Destroy All Monsters. And so there's like an album, there's an A side and a B side. And what's interesting about the relationship between the 2. There are these interstitial black pages in it, which are really interesting. Let's see if I can find one. There's a gray one. There's a black one. So there's some of it is interesting layout. My Dark Ages. There's a lot of really interesting things. There's chapter 1. How far into the book? I mean, that's very playful. Part 2. Day 100. Day 9. So there are chapters that are numbered by day to day. It's like, think about, I don't say this is what he did, but in Innovating, novel structures or fictional structures, you can think about what something would obviously be numbered or titled 1, 2, 3, 4, day 1, day 2, day 3, etc., and then throw a curveball in there. Don't do what's expected. Do something else that wakes the reader up. And this just wakes the reader up, the way it's structured. It's told from there are 3 major points of view, I believe, in the novel, talking about these 3 rock and roll kids who are affected by the murders. And then you flip it over to the B side, which is Kill City. The first one is My Dark Ages, side A. Then side B is Kill City. And it tells roughly the same story, but everything has changed. Genders, have changed. Who does what changes. So if one person performs an action, in the first one, it might be somebody else who performs that action. Somebody who is killed in the first one might be alive in the second one. It is taking the possibilities, the last rock novel. It is taking the possibility of the form of an A side and B side, and instead of doing a Rashomon type of thing, which is Rashomon is a Kurosawa film in which an incident happens and everybody who witnesses tells a different story, tells it differently, and you cannot tell who is what is the real version. It's saying life, there is no real version, that it's all points of view. And I was thinking that when we went to B-side, the easy thing, the first thought would just be to tell it from somebody else's point of view. But this is not what he does. He changes, say, 60% of the tale we have just told so that it's interrupted. Your expectations continue to be interrupted and surprised. He is a master at creating form. And I'll show you something that is a great exercise for anybody who is interested in innovating. Oh, I should clean off my screen. No, that's not what I wanted. I wanted his Instagram. So if you go to Instagram and you look for Death of Literature is his Instagram. Death of Literature. There he is. And some of what he posts here you have to go through his feed, but I'm going to go all the way to the bottom because I know there's a lot of examples of what I'm going to show you down at the bottom. And he is super knowledgeable, way worth following him in his... God, I had this up and I didn't mean to do this to you. But what he does is he'll find a picture that intrigues him in some ways. He's very visual. He's also an artist. He'll take a picture that intrigues him and then it'll inspire... He doesn't have to do it, but he'll say, possible narrator number 12 or possible novel structure number 6. And when he says it, you realize how accurate that is, how you really could create a novel structure from something he is looking at. I meant to go all the way to the bottom because there are a ton of them down here. There we go. All right. So he'll find something like this. Possible novel structure number 2. Oh, yeah. What would be this in the novel? If you were writing a novel, what would be this? That's a close-up of some. This would be something overheard. This would be maybe a school picture or a passport photo. This could be something a detective takes a picture of. Maybe this is a missing person. I'm already seeing possible novel structures. This guy, you cannot lose going through. Here's another, I can see that's going to be a possible novel structure. Look at that. That's a Sarah sculpture, and somebody's going in to one of the dead ends. I mean, possible novel structure number 1. Yes, indeed. It also echoes. You can hear people in other sections, people who might be getting it right, might be doing the maze correctly. Although we can look down and see perhaps there is no, oh, that looks like an entrance and that looks like an entrance. Is it possible to do this, or do we get lost in the maze? Is this life? What an interesting novel structure this would be. Let's see what else he has for us. That looks interesting. Here's somebody standing in a coral reef. Nope, just moments before walking to the sea. That's Jeff. Look at that, the mirror house. What's that? Possible novel structure number 5. The mirror house. House of mirrors in the landscape. And is there any way inside? Let's see if that's somebody. Nope. Possible novel structure number 8. Being too big, squeezed into this space. And you can see out, but you can't get out. I mean, this guy is so innovative. I could write novels just set in these photographs that here's a bunch of old guys pissing. Possible novel structure. That would be more of a Rashomon novel. And we're all stuck in this blind alley here. That's sort of Beckett-y. This is obviously possible narrator. Here's a good one. Oh, I'd love to write that. The abyss of the mirror. I love that. I could see that as a possible narrator. There are a lot of possible narrators in here too. Let's see one that I like. Anyway, I really recommend possible narrator number 1. I love that. Who is this girl? Who is this father? Why is he covering their eyes? I just see it, her story coming out there. So you can see how novel structures, or it doesn't have to be novel, I mean, it can be fictional structures, can come from anywhere. Anything that excites your, that inner playful person that tells stories. It's like a jungle gym. It gives a structure to the meanderings of story and of your mind. It also opens it up in a different way than linearity, a chronological structure does. Where are the cul-de-sacs? Where are the blind alleys? Then I wanted to talk about this book. There we go. Okay, this book is Life, a User's Manual by Georges Perec. And Georges Perec was a member of a group called Oulipo, which played games. They made up games. Third floor, right one. On the stairs, two. It sounds like Clue, right? In the servants' quarters, 6. Mademoiselle Crespi with a candlestick. Winkler, 3. But the way Oulipo, this whole novel, 500 pages, is this. It's a novel of structure. It's a game of structure. They were structuralists. The Oulipo group did like structures based on what you had to do and what you couldn't do. And I read this book and I could not believe what I was reading. It was a reader's book club. And everybody read it and went, what the hell was that about? It was 500 pages describing the contents of a French apartment, a Paris apartment house, a 6-story apartment house. Not about the people, not about what happened, the contents of the rooms. But as you read it, you realized that he was, you could find out the history of the place, the sociology of the place, the nature of the people by the description of their stuff. We start to understand as it moves through the apartment building randomly, it seemed. We start to see who lives on the top floor, poor people, because they had to walk up. It was the old maids' quarters. Who lived on the bel étage, the beautiful first floor with the high ceilings, and the bourgeois families live on that floor, and then they gradually become middle class, the next floor up, depending on how high you had to walk, because they didn't have elevators in the 19th century when these buildings were built. So you all of French society really is in that one apartment house, you know. It wasn't the monoculture that it is in, say, in America. And the artists live in the garrets up on top, and the young people and the very old people have to drag themselves up. But also you start to get the history of the people in the apartment house. You see, because people remember who the collaborators were during the war. So the war comes in to the story in a very subtle way. And then we started finding out more about Perec and about Oulipo and some of the games that were being played. And what's neat about this is that the games that are being played here are the moves that he makes. He grids the apartments on paper, and then it's the knight's gambit. So it's always up 3 over 2, or over 1, or up 3 over, or up 2 over 3. You know, it's the knight's gambit. So you get the whole apartment house, but it's little bits and pieces. And he does other games as well. He does like there in each chapter there are things that he has to do and things that he cannot do. Like there will be a color, there will be a word that he isn't supposed to use or is supposed to use. It is one of the most interesting structures. And this is the kind of book that I think that this gets into what Mayakovsky called books for the producer rather than books for the consumer. This is not a book that an average reader is going to be at all interested in. But it is certainly worth, if you are a writer and you want to see something really interesting, to read about this book, read about the Oulipo, Oulipo, the Oulipo uh, project. It kind of, in a way, continues the Surrealist games, but it also reminds me of the Lars von Trier, the Five Obstructions. It having limitations challenges and expands the imagination. It focuses you wonderfully. So the constraints that are in Life, a User's Manual, are incredible. Somebody had a whole file, to share of what Georges Perec allowed. He's the guy who wrote a whole novel without using the letter E, which in French is very difficult because I is je. It starts at the very beginning. He did a whole novel like that. So he's very interested in limitations and in structures, in innovating structures. And I cannot recommend this more highly, or just read about it and see if it tickles you at all. It's something it's a very purposeful construction. And let's see, what you get from listing what the contents of the apartments. You learn so much about the people. How handy are they? What do they collect? What's left over? Here's on the stairs, draft inventory of some of the things found on the stairs over the years, because one of the grids must have been stairs. Several photos, including one of a 15-year-old girl wearing a black swimsuit bottom and white knitwear sweater kneeling on a beach. A radio alarm clock, obviously destined for the Menders, in a plastic bag from the Nicholas Company. A black shoe decorated by jewels, etc., etc. Just, what's in Cecil Altamont's study. And we get such a picture, and it's such a brilliant way to tell a story. Then, the last but not least, this is the book that the writer who won the Nobel this year. And I'm very lucky to know the translator, Jennifer Croft. It won the Booker, and now Olga Tokarczuk has won the Nobel. So this will be very easy to get a hold of. And this is Flight's. It's a novel in fragments of what she knows about various aspects of the body. So there's sections with historical, like there's a guy who invented, different autopsy, anatomical methods. There's a taxidermist. There's, doctors. It's about flight. So the taxidermy and preservation is talking about staying in the flesh, and then there are things about religious relics. There are things about colonization and who is considered a specimen, and how long that's happened. There's a lot of the cabinets of curiosities, and different people involved in these questions, from historical to current. It's such an interesting mix of things. So it's full of these small kind of fictional essays. So just belly dance, meridians. And people recur, and you start, there's a sanitary pads. The word lethologia describes the state of being unable to recall the word you're looking for. That's beautiful. Interesting facts that this woman finds on her sanitary pads that she picks up at the pharmacy. Entertaining little facts. Who was invented by who? So there are stories of people who go on for a while, then another story comes in, then you might come back to that person. There's a disappearance, so that kind of a flight. There's lots of airport stuff. One of the characters is an airport psychologist, a travel psychologist, which just blends beautifully in this book. Panopticon. There's a lot of material on cabinets of wonder, which is linked to science and the 19th century, which also has an aspect of colonization, as people explored the world and took what they thought belonged to them. It did not. A lot of stuff, maps, the history of so-and-so, written by his student and confidant. That is a character. Preservation, whales, or drowning in air. It casts its net very wide, and I would definitely recommend this. I had read an earlier book by her that I didn't even realize was her book, House of Day, House of Night. She's Polish, and this is a very Central European novel that isn't so much about science, but is about a muddy small town that you think almost could be 19th century, except that people have cell phones, and it too is told in small fragments or small sections. Rain, the hood, the flood, which I found the novel just would not have excited me the way it did had it been written conventionally as one continuous story. It's a story of this kind of benighted village and the people in it. And they talk to each other, the pieces talk to each other as the pieces in Flights do. It's enigmatic, and I would say this is written for the mass audience, but I don't know if, it takes a good reader to read Flights. I would say House of Day, House of Night would be more a general reader. But it did win the Nobel. I mean, we're talking about the development of great literature, and the fragmentation of contemporary life is everywhere in evidence in her two books. That we live in the shattered remains of the 19th century, in the shattered remains of these kind of scientific positivism, in the idea of collections and completion. Flight, of course, is flight from, you run from, but it's also the freedom to break away from home. So there's the flight away, there's the flight from, and then consequently there's the idea of permanence, works against the idea of permanence, and home and structures. So we break the structures. That is an incredibly beautiful book. And so I know a new one of hers is coming out. But just to give you some idea of possible structures, possible narrators, Mark Danielewski, Pinar says, Only Revolutions is an extreme version of the rock and roll novel, and you can read it both ways from two different perspectives. Only Revolutions is, yeah, it's a beautiful book also physically. It tells the story of two teenagers who fall in love, and it's told from both directions. And as this one gets bigger, this one gets smaller, and they cross in the middle. Typologically, it is a beautiful book. Yeah, that is amazing. Stephen King's Running Man used chapters to give us a sense of time running out. Yeah, figure out what your book is about and think about what would be an interesting way to tell that story. Or if you're starting, say, a short story, and you want to just look at a photograph that has an interesting structure in it and go, how could I make that into the structure of a story? I wonder what the planning process was for a structure like The Travelers, with all those people. I think that I haven't heard her interviewed or anything, so this is just completely off the top of my head. But I think that that she had at least 2 or 3 stories in that book in mind, and then saw how they could connect. That they weren't, you don't start out with that many characters. You start out with a little constellation here and maybe a little constellation here, and then you start seeing, oh my God, and somehow they met, and how did that happen? And then it's somebody who definitely has the imagination that branches out and thinks of connection. Some people have that, some people don't. It's a geographic sense of mapping. I love a map. Anybody who's read the 2 Russian books has seen I have maps in the books. I need to know where things happen. I'm just fanatical about geography. So I also have a very good memory for people because I remember who they know and how I know them and who I'm related to. I have a big family that also, there's lots of branches, and I know how people are related because I know who the original 8 children of the grandmother and grandfather, and then the 8 children, and then who their children are. It's very natural for me. But I know people who, they don't have map mind. So they get lost going to the market. They can't remember they don't understand relationships like aunts and uncles and cousins, often only children or children of only children. They don't have that extensive family, so not used to the mapping of relationships. So I have a feeling that she might be somebody who has a complex family that already can be used. She has that muscle is very strong, is my guess. So I don't think that a writer like that outlines it first. I think they start writing, seeing the connections, it starts branching out, and then they realize that people are not going to be able to. People keep going like, who's Flora Applewood? Who's, Claudia Christie? What? So then came the cast list, and then you remember, because it's a multi-generational novel and really a beautiful one. Past life stuff is very fascinating indeed. Parallel lives. I've written poems about that, but the life that you could be leading and the life that you are leading, the life that you would have led if you hadn't met so-and-so, the Garden of Forking Paths, a very Borgesian idea. The old woman who catches sight of somebody who looks a lot like her as she did as a girl, living a different life. That's very interesting. Yeah, shifting time is super intriguing as far as time goes. All right, well, let's see how we're doing on time. I'm, of course, out of battery on my clock. This is a good one. So anyway, that's just a little bit of possible novel structures, innovating structure. And I'm sure I'll revisit this as I read other things that attract my attention. So thank you. And this will... I'm also archiving all of my Writing Wednesdays onto YouTube for people who don't normally do Facebook or are nervous about it or just want an easier format to look. These will always live on the YouTube page. And I've just done a YouTube with Tim Green, who was a poetry editor at Rattle Magazine, who wanted me to read poems from Chimes of Lost Cathedral and from the Revolution of Marina M, which I've never done before. So that was fun. You can find that on the Rattlecast, which is also YouTube. And hope you have good writing. Bye.